Fisheries on Long Island, indeed fisheries around the world, have problems. The famed Peconic-based scallop has been hard hit. So have clams from the Great South Bay, once the source of 60% of the hard clams eaten in the United States. What are the problems? What can be done?
High in quality as they used to be, and that's what the estuaries are the primary nurseries for most of the fishes that are caught along the coast by commercial fishermen and sports fishermen.
Now, government in recent decades has done a lot about overfishing, but has it done enough about the pollution of the estuarine environment?
I don't think they have done enough, because what they did is they picked on what they thought was the obvious thing, too much catch. We have to remember that the rules and regulations have become much more strenuous and much more protective over the years. For example, winter flounder now is a protected species that can still be fished, but the size limits have been increased and the quotas and so forth. But that alone is not going to get the winter flounder back. It was the primary early season fish for the fishing industry. So it's a stopgap measure. We don't see any sign of recovery of the winter flounder, and this is true for many, many species around the world. And I lay most of the blame to what's happening in our estuaries, the pollution of our estuaries, which is kind of like global warming. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy to reverse that pollution. We're working on it, but I think we have to even work on it more strenuously.
Now, there's an effort to deal with the crisis of the fisheries by aquaculture, both on Long Island and globally. I mean, if you go to buy some salmon in the store these days, most are, they call it farm raised. Is aquaculture good or bad?
Well, it depends. If we're talking about sea farming, where we have fish out in pens, like they do with the salmon in some states, Washington, for example, then you're talking about throwing in a lot of food, and the feces are in one spot, and you're really mucking up the area. You may be growing big fish, but you're mucking up the area. The new trend, which I think is the best trend, is kind of what many countries are doing around the world, and some states in the United States are doing, and that is they are actually raising the young, fertilizing the eggs of a particular species, raising the young, and then releasing them into the open sea. Japan is doing this with many, many species, including giant bluefin tuna, which are very scarce, other species of tuna, and Norway and Sweden. But we're way behind the ball in that respect. We could be up, bringing that stock back with raising and releasing. Because the stock is not necessarily going to come back by itself, even in the absence of fishing pressure. It's not necessarily going to return, because you have all these other species that are competing with that, with those low stocks, like winter flounder and Atlantic puffer. I can name a bunch of species which are way down. They're not going to come back by themselves necessarily, even though the prophets have figured that they will.
Now, the Peconic-based scallop was a famed delicacy. There are a few when the scallop season comes, but very few, and it's very expensive. Do you have much hope in the seeding of the bays on eastern Long Island for scallops?
Well, I think the real solution here is going to be maybe seeding, but also bringing back the eelgrass beds, which were the primary nursery grounds and escape grounds and cover for the young bay scallops when they're growing up, but without making the water quality better, I just don't think it's it's going to take a long time. We need to keep working on the water quality. We need to seed, but we also need to reproduce the rich eelgrass cover that was so responsible for the big scallop years.
Can that be done? Can you, like throwing out grass seed, can you grow eelgrass? And I mean, the bays are huge.
Well, the amazing thing is that the eelgrass is not even protected really under New York state law. Now there's a big eelgrass task force that is just being formed for the New York State, or has been formed, and they're going to look into this. It's a much overlooked part of the environment. In fact, we in East Hampton town, because of the town trustees' interest in eelgrass, have just started buoying off and protecting the largest eelgrass bed, for example, in Napeague Harbor. This has never been done before in any township or any other place on Long Island. This is experimental, but our preliminary dives show that the eelgrass wants to come back, but if you keep going in there with clam rakes and other implements and motorboats and things like that, it may not come back. So we're going to try to protect areas of eelgrass the way we protect piping plovers and roseate terns and other rare species.
Howard Pickerel, through aquaculture, grows oysters on Long Island.
What we have here is basically a float, which is called an upweller. And if you look down inside, you'll see there's 16 of these silos with screens on the bottom. And what happens is the water flows up through there. There's probably 1,000 oysters in each one of these silos. The water flows up through the bottom, through the pipe, all these green pipes here with the screens on them, flows into the middle here, and this is like a river, and it's going downhill, and there's a water pump on the other end, and it sucks the water through it, and the water comes up through here, into the center trough, and it goes right out, and it just constantly circulates the water. And I'm using surface water for the most part because there's more nutrients in the surface water. And I don't know if you could pick it up with the camera or not, but the water on the outside of the silo, you can see that it's more greener than the water that's on the inside of the silo. And that's because the oysters are sucking the nutrients out of the water, the algae. They live on algae. I don't know if you can pick it up or not, the color difference, but it's greener here than it is here. They siphon feed, they're constantly pumping. And I'm going to reach my hand down there. I'm going to grab probably 100 oysters. That's about 100 oysters right there. They're anywhere from 7 to 12 millimeter now. In 18 months, they'll be 3 inches long. So I put them out in the bay. Once they get out of here, they go into these mesh bags that have about a ½ inch opening in them. I put them out in the bay on the bay bottom on my land, and the salinity is higher there, and it makes a nice hard shell on them, nice white hard shell. Works out really fine.
Howard, explain the promise of aquaculture and the kind of work you're doing with oysters.
What I'm doing is I purchased seed from Flowers Oyster Company, and I start them as you could call it spat, the tiny oysters. And I got started doing this, about 15, 16 years ago. I guess it's 16 years now. We got hooked up with Cornell over in Southold because the hard clams have really depleted in the area here. And so we didn't have too much to do around here to make a living on the water, so they started us on this here program of growing oysters in containment. And I was probably one of the first ones to get involved with it. And it seems to work out really well. You know, we get seed, we put them in containment, meaning these mesh bags, and we put them out in the bay, and our bay conditions are really fantastic for growing oysters. The salinity is just right. Have a nice hard white shell on them, and it has a unique Peconic Bay taste, similar to the Peconic Bay scallop, which is known worldwide. It's a really nice product. And our water conditions are conducive to the fact that we can grow an oyster from 7 to 12 millimeter. We can go in 18 months. We can have it 3 inches long, and we could sell that oyster in 18 months. And so that works out really well.
Now, your oysters are very much desired at the American Hotel in Sag Harbor, kind of a 4-star place. The restaurant there are pickerel oysters on the menu every night.
Yeah, I only sell to specialty restaurants and hotels and so forth. All the white cloth places. I get a premium price for them, and it's I get a because I grow a premium product, and I'm very consistent with my deliveries. I deliver and I sail all winter long. Bringing the oysters in, from my grounds out in the bay.
Now, how big a role can this kind of aquaculture take in terms of basically replacing what used to be?
Well, there's basically no more natural product around anymore to speak of. You can't make a living, on natural product. You have to, what we call farm them to make a living at it nowadays. They're just not, natural shellfish are just not coming back to our bays anymore. So we put them here, they do fantastic. It's a really nice, the water conditions are ideal here.
In terms of what happened to cause, well, the word is collapse. The collapse of this, what was such a incredible fishery. What would you point to?
Well, it was, back in '85, we had a brown tide that killed off, a good part of the eelgrass, and the eelgrass is a natural habitat for small shellfish and flatfish, also finfish, and since we lost that, we just don't have any place. They're spawning all the time. They spawn constantly, when the water gets to be about 70 degrees or so, and but they're just getting eaten up because they have no habitat to hide in, from the predators. Shellfish are scallops, clams and oysters are, spawning on a regular basis every summer. They just don't have no place to go, no habitat. I do find even scallops and hard clams in my oyster bags. They're just looking for a place to hang out and hide, from the predators. The fish and the crabs just gobble them right up. So they like the eelgrass that they can have a little protection from the predators.
If somehow that eelgrass could revive, can be grown again, can be resurrected, you think that the fishery here, the scallop and clam fishery, can be brought back?
Most definitely, absolutely. That's if we could get the eelgrass back again. A lot of the baymen could make a really good living on the water again, like it was years back. That's a fact. And
the eelgrass died because the brown tide didn't let the sun come in. It's not like any kind of plant. The eelgrass it couldn't grow without the sun.
You're right. Yes, yeah, that's true. It blocked off the light, and it didn't kill the shellfish. What it did is it stopped them from feeding. So essentially, it killed them in the long run. It took a couple of years to kill most of the shellfish off. Even though they're spawning, they just couldn't feed enough to grow and survive. It plugged up their intestines and so forth.
Bottom line, though, is you see aquaculture as one possible way out.
At the present time, it's the only way that you can make a living on the water right now. Natural product is just non-existent anymore. But so we are left to do nothing else but to do aquaculture, which is actually farming. And the waters are very conducive to that. It's really nice, high-quality water. In the coves here where we are right now, the salinity is down, and juvenile shellfish like brackish water. When they get to a certain size, I put them out into the bay, and the salinity becomes a little greater, and it makes a nice hard white shell on them. And there's a lot of flow out in the bay, because we have the canal right down here, and we have the ocean just on the east end here. So the water in the bay is fantastic.
Now, fisheries on Long Island aren't in the greatest of shape. I mean, the Peconic Bay scallop at this point is his unusual clams from the Great South Bay have become, well, not what they were. What's the situation?
Well, you've named two shellfish that are definitely having very serious problems with reproduction. Clams in Great South Bay virtually don't exist. The bay scallop is struggling to come back and probably won't come back until the great eelgrass beds reestablish themselves. Those were all killed off in the brown algae blooms of the mid-1980s, you know, and it takes a long time for that eelgrass to come back. Now those are the shellfish, you know, and they have particular, you know, environmental problems that are causing them to be rather scarce now. But, you know, with the finfish tend, some of them with short lifespans, reproduce very quickly. I mean, porgies, that's a really good example. You know, 2 years ago, the fish managers thought, uh-oh, the porgies are on a really serious decline. They're scarce. And then this year, the porgies suddenly, actually in 2006, the porgies had this tremendous successful reproduction and are, you know, looking to be very plentiful again. With a longer life fish like striped bass, for example, there's good management measures in place. I mean, striped bass are probably right now as populous as they ever were. I mean, they are really successfully reproducing in the Chesapeake and the Hudson River, and there are a lot of them, you know, and that's an example of good management. And what the fish managers have discovered, though, the commercial fisheries have been year after year curtailed more and more until, I mean, practically, you know, you sometimes are working on catches as small as 20 pounds a day for a particular food fish species, you know. But the managers have discovered that really the problem is a lot the sports fisheries. It's very difficult to regulate and monitor the activities of the sports fisheries. And this year, right now, two examples, there's a required reduction in the catch of blackfish, also known as tautog. And the fish managers have required that the reduction in catch be taken entirely from the recreational fisheries. The commercial guys already in the past were severely restricted, and now the managers have discovered that the sports catch is exceeding what is healthy for, you know, the population. The same is true with fluke, or also called summer flounder, where this year the sports fisheries are taking a pretty serious reduction in the landings of fluke, where the commercial guys are pretty much at the same level of catching. They've been reduced in the past a lot, you know. So it seems to, you know, those of us who are involved in this fisheries management, and I go to a lot of meetings, you know, down in Washington and elsewhere, and it just seems to us that management is beginning to work, you know. I mean, there are definitely signs that we're beginning to understand how to manage the fisheries. The sad thing is that in the course of all this, like losing the scallops and having some of the management measures be so severe that they just eliminated, you know, traditional commercial fisheries, like the ban on taking striped bass with the Halsane method, for example, is a good example of bad management. There was no reason to have done that, and it put a lot of guys out of work, you know. And but if we follow as we learn what are good management practices and how to apply them, you know, we might help sustain these traditional inshore fisheries, these baymen. And the sad thing is that already, because of the loss of the shellfish stocks and these severe management measures that were in some cases very unthinkingly applied, the baymen's community has been very seriously diminished. and I mean, it's rare when a bayman's kids want to go into, fishing. It's just too hard, too many restrictions. So the sad thing is the community has been diminished a lot, and the knowledge that gets passed on by generation to generation is in danger of being lost, or partially lost, because the new generations are not going to go into it. But some of us feel that there is hope, that some of it, can be saved, that the tradition can be handed on, and maybe one day again, grow rather than diminish.
Now, overfishing is a distinct problem. I mean, the cod off Newfoundland decimated by overfishing, and there's other examples. The other issue, though, a kind of parallel issue, is pollution of the estuarine environment where fish feed and breed. Is as much being done to deal with environmental pollution as has been done to deal with overfishing?
Well, I think that, the government feels it's a lot easier to restrict commercial fishermen than it is to control real estate developers. And so they tend to, when there's a problem with a fish population, they tend first to look at the commercial fisherman. Let's stop his activity and maybe the fish will grow again, without looking hard enough at, hey, what happened to the nursery areas of these fish?
Overfishing, then, is a very real problem, too.
Yeah, but, overfishing is something that is being addressed today by the managers. What happened was when the U.S. created the 200-mile limit and said these are our waters, they then offered all kinds of financial incentives for guys to go into this offshore fishery. And they actually made the offshore fishing fleet much too efficient. There were too many guys in it. They could get these low-interest loans and get all this, high-tech fish finding and fish catching equipment. And there's just no question it got too efficient, But now the people have learned, the government has learned, the fishermen have learned that, being too efficient is no good. Because look what happened up in the Georges Bank area of the fishery. I mean, the cod were fished out, haddock and yellowtail flounder have all had population problems. These are all, by the way, species that are offshore. They're not what the baymen work on. But again, the managers learned, you see, so steps have been taken. Great areas have been closed, no fishing, or only during certain seasons and only very limited catches, and with certain types of nets and not other nets. So a learning process is going on, and I think that overfishing can well be addressed by, if there's a willingness on the part of the government to really look at it and deal with the fishermen, and come up with solutions that don't just kill the fishermen right off, And part of the problem there, of course, is, we're just one country, a big one, with a big fishery, but there are lots of other countries, and some of them, third world countries, have such food shortage problems that they're not too interested in, like, curtailing the catch that their fishermen can bring in, So there are global problems here, too, that are way beyond our ability to control. That's something that a world organization is going to have to get involved with in a more meaningful way.
In terms of the global issue, foreign trawlers all but vacuuming the ocean clear of fish.
Yeah, well, of course, that was part of the reason why the 200-mile limit was put in effect, to keep the foreign trawlers from coming within 200 miles of the U.S. and taking up the fish that our guys had been traditionally working on, But, as I say, many of the civilized countries are perfectly aware that they need the same kind of management that we are developing here. I think the problem really comes in with, third world countries where the pressure to produce food is so great. I mean, you're dealing with starvation, you know, and when there's starvation, it's very hard to worry about, like, being careful with, you know, what kind of net you use. You just want to catch something.
The sign used to read, "No fishing." At this rate, the signs may read, "No fish." This has been a special report of WVVH-TV. I'm Karl Grossman. Thanks for watching.